And welcome back to Cabinetry Basics. In part one, I talked about the fundamental structure of a small wall hang cabinet like this one, and why we make them the way we do, why arrange the top and the base within the sides like this. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the simplest ways of joining these together using what I call invasive techniques. So invasive joinery techniques are a little bit like invasive surgery. There will be scarring, and it's really just a question of how you deal with that. Do you cover that up? Do you just accept it, or will it be hidden anyway? Because that kind of scarring doesn't just affect the surface of the material. If it needs to be filled and sanded smooth before painting, for example, it can also affect the order of construction, the fabrication, the transport and installation. We'll come to all of that later in the video. But for now, let's answer the fundamental question of why we need any kind of mechanical fixing to keep these boards together. So modern glues are immensely strong. You can grab a bottle of just about any kind of PVA adhesive and the fully cured joint will likely be stronger than the material you're gluing together. I did a video about this before, where I built a small side table with the top and the shelf just glued onto the legs, and I actually had to jump up and down on that before I could get it to break. And when it did break, it was actually the material that gave way and not the glue. But as I said in that video, I'd never recommend that anybody just glues a cabinet or a table together, simply because over time the adhesive will fail. And when that happens, you'll need some kind of mechanical connector, some kind of physical connection to keep everything held together. Mechanical fixings are also incredibly useful during the glue up, as they can act as clamps, keeping both halves of the joint tightly together while the glue sets. The downside is that the basic connectors, nails and screws for example, also mark the surface. How badly? Well, as always, it's easier for me to get on and get one made than it is for me to explain it. So let's just whack a carcass together and we'll find out. Now, I said earlier in the previous video that these cabinets are all the same size. It's 600 high, 400 wide and 300 deep. That's 24 by 16 by 12 inches or thereabouts, because that's typical of the kind of small cabinet that a lot of folks make as a first project. And I not only wanted them to be sort of relatable, but I also want to be able to use them here in the workshop when we're finished with the video series. The techniques are also scalable, so you could also use them for making a larger cabinet or a wardrobe, for example. I've already cut my boards to size. I use my track saw for this, and I'm going to nail the base on first and then use screws to fix the top. So when it comes to just nailing something together, it's actually harder than it looks, because fairly obviously you can't just kind of balance that on the side and sort of nail it, because you need too many hands. What I found was particularly useful is to, and we're just using 40mm panel pins on this, about 1 3/4 inches just over. We'll pop 3 of these in. So we're just going to tap those in to get them started. And then just because I've got them, I'm going to use a couple of bench dogs in the bench here. You could just as easily clamp something or nail something to the bench, and that gives us the chance to lift that up, and then we can kind of lift that into position. So that gives us an easy way of holding that steady. So what we can do, we can just put a bead of glue along there. And give that a quick wipe over. And if you've got your boards cut nice and square, nice and straight, it should be fairly clear when that's coming square, but if you need to, you can add a little square in over the edge like that, and that'll show you when it's there. I love it when things go to plan. So that's our first joint done. What I'll do is I'll put that to one side for a sec. Come back to that in a minute. Let's do the second one with screws this time. So same kind of idea. bead of glue on it. And then we can do the same thing. Into position. So the next one, this is going to be a nailed one. Now it gets a little bit easier because we've got this, a bit of support here. Bead of glue again, you can get that in the right place. No need to balance it at an angle or anything. And this time I'm going to use a nail gun. It's a 16 gauge nail going all the way through. And finally, a little squeeze of glue on there. And now for this one, I'm going to use a specialist screw designed specifically for MDF called a Specs M-Cut, which I like. They're my standard sort of screws. And they're self-countersinking. So there we are, that's our half screwed and half nailed little cabinet, little carcass. I will let the glue dry, then we'll come back to that and fill it and sand it later on. Got glue everywhere. Now there's another type of fixing at this kind of level that falls into the, I guess, semi-invasive side of things, and they're pocket hole screws. I've never really used pocket hole screws. In fact, before I made my portable bench build, the original one, the slightly heavier one, I'd probably only used 20 pocket hole screws in 20 years. I'm not violently opposed to them. I just dislike the damage that they do to the surface of the material, which is far, far more invasive than any of the other kinds of fixings that we've used here today, in my opinion. But they are very effective, they're very easy to use, and they're pretty reasonably priced. So again, let's get a carcass built with pocket hole screws, and I'll talk you through that as I go. Pocket hole screws use a jig to drill a hole at an angle, so that you can screw through into the inside face of the carcass. Like using regular screws and nails, they're a one-sided connector, which makes them very easy and very quick to use. But unlike screws and nails, you're working off the inside face, so they're not only easy to use, they don't mark the outer faces. But they do leave deep scars on the top and the base. The top often won't be seen, and you can work it so that the pocket holes in the base are inside the cabinet, but that's still an ugly gash in the surface of the material that needs to be filled. You can buy angled wooden infills that can help, or just use regular filler. I'm going to use a 2-pack resin soon, but bear in mind that these scars are right in the corner of the carcass, so they can be quite difficult to fill and sand cleanly. So that's our two carcasses put together with nails, screws and pocket hole screws. You pay your money and you make your choice. Nails are surprisingly effective with just a small hole that needs filling, whether it's a panel pin or a 16 gauge nailer. Screws the same, albeit with a larger amount of filling and slightly less in the self-countersinking screws. And pocket hole screws, of course, in many ways the easiest of all, but the joint that needs the most filling and leaves the worst scarring. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that the type of fixing you use can determine more than just the method of fabrication, and fairly obviously these are only suitable for a painted finish where the holes can be filled before painting. This means that unless you're planning to paint on site, then anything using these methods needs to be fully built and painted before you can transport it. Now that's fine for a small cabinet like these, but a different matter completely if, say, you're building a wardrobe which needs to be carried complete into the property, up the stairs and into the bedroom. Those are the kind of situations where a non-invasive jointing method comes into its own. So be sure to join me next time, where I'll be taking a closer look at using dowels, biscuits, dominoes and other knockdown fittings to make our little cabinets. But I'll leave it there for this one, I think. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up or leave me a comment down below. And as always, thanks so much to my Patreon pals and my YouTube members for their amazing support. I really appreciate the comments and the feedback on the behind the scenes videos, the exclusive content and the weekly vlogs that are just my way of saying thanks so much to those who do provide member support. That's it for this week though. Thanks again for watching. As always, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you next time.